Today's video is all about water brushes. What are they? What do you use them for? What should you not use them for? And how do you actually use this handy little art supply in practical terms? My name is Alex, I'm a professional artist, and I picked up a water brush for the first time a few years ago, and I was surprised to find that there was actually a lot more to learn about this tool than I had realized. But don't worry, this tutorial will walk you through all of the basics so that you can avoid making the same mistakes I made, and by the end of this video you will know everything you need to start using a water brush for your art. Let's start by talking about what a water brush is. So a water brush is a very handy art supply for water-based mediums such as watercolors, watercolor pencils, and gouache. Most of you will be familiar with a traditional watercolor brush, which usually has a wooden handle and a brush of soft animal hairs at the end. You pick up water from one cup and then clean the brush in another while you paint, which works great when you're painting inside your studio. It can be a little bit tedious though to empty and refill the water since it gets dirty while you work. But this is the tried and true traditional watercolor setup. What this setup isn't so great for though is bringing it with you outside when you go to draw on location. Or when you just want to do a quick sketch to get an idea down and you don't want to bring out the whole watercolor setup. And that's where the water brush comes into the picture. A water brush is a brush with its own water reservoir. You just fill it up and then you're good to go. You can use it for those quick sketches inside your studio or to bring with you when you go outside. It's super handy and it really makes painting with watercolors so much easier when you're out and about. So if a water brush is really that good, then you might be wondering, why use the clunky traditional setup at all? And the short answer here, if you ask me, is that the water brush isn't as good at precision compared to a regular high quality brush. And what I mean by that is that the brush hairs on most water brushes are synthetic, and it's just hard to get those super thin and precise brush strokes with them. You can do pretty well if you angle the brush just right, but it takes a bit of effort. A regular brush, on the other hand, is very precise. It's super easy to make very thin lines and to really get into those tricky little corners of the painting. Of course, you can buy water brushes of different sizes, which makes precision easier. But like I said, most of them are synthetic and they're just not as good in my subjective opinion. So I would personally recommend using a water brush for sketches, but I wouldn't really use them for an illustration myself. With that said, you should always choose what you like and what works best for you. Here are a few examples of illustrations where I needed more precision and therefore I chose a regular brush instead. Another thing that I want to mention here is the ergonomic aspect of using a water brush. Since the water brush works by you squeezing the water out, it means that you'll be doing a lot of squeezing, which can put your hand and wrist under a bit of stress, especially if you do it often and for very long sessions. But I'll get back to this topic later in the video where I will also share a solution to this problem. Now that we know what a water brush is and what it's good at and what it's not so good at, let's go over the basics for how to use one, and also some tips and tricks for how you can refill it when you're outside. Now, if you've bought your very first water brush, the first thing you'll want to do is screw off the top part and fill the bottom half with water. If you've done this already, then you might have also noticed that some water brushes actually turn the wrong way. Yes, I know, it's super annoying and unfortunately I don't have a good explanation for you. I'd like to think that there's a reason for it, that it isn't a completely pointless annoyance, but then again, a fair amount of water brushes do turn the right way and they work flawlessly. So there you have it. The takeaway here is basically, don't be surprised if your water brush turns the wrong way when you take the tip on and off. To fill your water brush up, just hold it under the tap, then screw the top back on and you are ready to use it. First, you'll want to put a bit of water in the pans of paint to soften the pigments up. Just hover over the pan and press lightly on the body of the brush until a couple of drops come out. Just like with a regular brush, you then swoosh the brush around a bit in the pan to lift off the pigments. Just be careful not to rub the brush against the direction of the hairs since it will bend them and ruin the sharp tip. Use circular motions and pull the brush toward your hand and not away from it. Once you have some pigments on the brush tip, you just put the brush to the paper and start to paint. Squeeze the brush whenever you want to mix more water in, and you'll notice that when you do this, you'll see more intense pigments at the start of the stroke and less at the end. Or if you use very little water, you can also get a nice dry brush effect. If you don't intend for that dry brush effect to happen, just squeeze the body of the brush a bit more, which will mix more water into the pigments and make the brush run across the paper a bit more easily. When you start playing around with a water brush, you'll quickly see that water control is really important here, getting just the right amount of water and pigments on the brush to achieve the effect that you want. This might be frustrating or difficult in the beginning, but just keep going. You're gonna get used to the tool over time, so don't worry about the result, just keep going. When you're done using a specific color and you want to switch to another, it's a good idea to clean the brush. Of course, you can just clean it like a regular brush and dip it in water, but the great thing with a water brush is that you don't have to. All you need is a rag or some paper towels. I personally like to use the rag because it absorbs water really well, which means you can use it longer, and when it's too saturated or dirty, you can just wash it and use it again. To clean the brush on your rag or paper towel, just press the body of the brush so that the water starts to flow, and then you just wipe the brush over the rag until there's no more pigments coming off. Then you're ready to use the next color. As before, you just lift off some pigments, paint what you want to paint, and then wipe the brush clean once again. Initially, I thought that this way of cleaning the brush was going to empty the water reservoir so fast, but that really isn't the case. When I'm out painting with this brush, I can normally use it for several sketchbook spreads before I need to refill it again. But of course, it also depends on the type of brush you have, how much water it can hold, and how hard you press on it. But we'll get back to this topic later in the video as well. Another thing I want to cover here is that once in a while, you might notice that you've somehow gotten colored water inside the brush. This is pretty rare for me these days, but it has happened a few times by accident. Basically, this happens if you're pressing and releasing the brush while there's either a lot of water and pigments on the brush and it just gets sucked back in once the pressure releases, or if you're pressing and releasing while still holding the brush inside a little pool of pigments. Keep in mind that the water brush works a bit like a pipette. If you press and release, then whatever's at the tip of that brush is gonna get sucked in. So try to avoid that and make sure that the brush tip is pointing down, not up when you release the pressure. And in case you do end up getting pigments into the reservoir, that's okay, just empty it and refill it with clean water. You'll also want to make sure to check this part right here near the brush tip, because the pigments can get trapped in here as well. Try to wash it out under the tap. You can also try squeezing the pigments out and doing a regular clean on a rag or paper towel until the water that comes out is completely clear. Now let's talk about what you can do if you run out of water while you're outside and you don't have access to tap water. The good news is that you can easily refill the brush if you plan and come prepared. What I like to do is bring this tiny bottle of water and a regular pipette. I actually got this bottle when I ordered sushi at one point. It was filled with soy sauce and later I washed it and kept it because it's such a good bottle to bring extra water in. It's so small, but it still holds several refills for a water brush. And what you do is you squeeze the pipette, you pull out water from the bottle and then release it into the water brush. It's super easy and I always make sure to bring this setup with me for longer trips. Once you're done using the brush, it's a good idea to empty the water out in the sink and leave all of the different parts of the water brush open to dry. There's a risk that if you leave water in it for too long, some algae or something might start to grow, but to be honest, I've forgotten water inside my brushes for weeks, sometimes more, and I've never had a problem like that. But I also live in a colder climate, so that might also play into it. Either way, it's best to just empty the water brush and leave all the parts to dry to be on the safe side. Next, I want to take a moment to also talk about different kinds of water brushes and why quality really matters. So, long story short, the very first water brush I ever got was this one. I found it in one of my favorite art supply stores and it was extremely cheap to begin with, but it was also on sale. I think I got it for something like €2. I thought it was a great deal, but no. I am sorry to say, but this brush is absolute garbage. And you can't really see it until you fill it up with water and try it. Because the thing is, the water doesn't actually come out of the brush tip as it's supposed to. It's coming out here on the side. And then the water is just leaking and dripping down and making the brush wet. But it's not coming out of the brush itself. And it took me more time than I'd like to admit to realize this. In fact, I think I'd used it on a number of occasions when I was drawing outside, and I had been very frustrated with how hard it was and how hard I had to press and how little water actually came out of it. And then one day, as I was fighting with this sketch right here, to the point where I was prepared to just abandon water brushes altogether forever, and I realized that the problem was just that this particular brush wasn't working. So what I did next, because I really liked the concept of a water brush, is that I looked up other water brushes online, brushes from known and trusted brands, and then I ordered about 4 or 5 different brushes to try out, because I thought that at least one of them had to be a good fit for me. And I was right. I got this water brush from Derwent, which I love and have used non-stop ever since I got it. And just to be clear, I am not sponsored or anything. I just genuinely love this brush and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to start trying water brushes. No need to spend your time and money on different brands like I did. This one is the best in my opinion, and for several reasons. For one, it holds a lot of water, unlike some of the other brushes. It's also really comfortable to press on the pad rather than pressing on the plastic body of the brush, which is what you do for the most basic types of water brushes. Because you actually have to use a surprising amount of force when pressing on these water brushes, but with this one it's super sensitive. Just a small amount of pressure will bring water out, but you can also use a lot of pressure to get a lot of water flowing more quickly. I'm thinking about making a more in-depth review of different water brushes in the future, so do let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see. I have one more thing I'd like to share with you before wrapping this video up, and that's how to handle the watercolors themselves when you want to paint outside. Usually I will bring one of these, or sometimes even both. And I like them because they're small and light, but they still hold a lot of colors. This smallest one holds up to 12 colors, and the bigger one can hold 18. The palettes I've put together myself. I have all these paints on tubes, and then I will handpick a good range and create this palette. The colors in this one are super granulation colors, and I like to bring them with me when I have more time to sit down. This other one I often use when I'm on the go. For example, if I have to sit at the airport and wait for a while. I've also used it for quicker sketches when I'm outside and I don't have a lot of time. All I wanted to say with this is that you don't have to bring your whole studio with you. It's better to just bring a few carefully selected art supplies and travel light. If you're still here, still watching, then congratulations, you've got the basics down and you are ready to go out there and rock that water brush. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you have any questions or if you think that there was something that I forgot to mention in this video, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.